Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making some GoPro camera mounts. Well, we're all about the recycling these days, aren't we? And that's what this project is all about. Not necessarily about ABS plastic, not necessarily about GoPro mounts, but more about taking things that you would normally slate for the garbage and reusing them. And now I have a need for a certain type of GoPro mount in order to film certain segments of my show. And I have an idea, and what I have is some parts that, as I said, were slated for the garbage, and we're gonna try to recycle them and make the mount ourselves. So let's head over to the bench. I've got an old gooseneck lamp that was given to me that was slated for the garbage. And what I want for this mount actually is this gooseneck section. This is what makes this mount usable for me. So I'll keep that aside. There is a socket in the reflector. I'll probably throw the reflector out, but I have an idea for the socket that we will get to on another show. So I'll put that aside and we can recycle that into a different project. We also have an old spring clamp. And these are ones that I've had for many, many years. I really don't find myself using them very often because I find that they dent the wood, and I'm not too fond of them, but they will be perfect for this application. So I have an old spring clamp and of course some ABS plastic to make the mount, and that is where we're going to start. Now we've already taken this over to the table saw and I've squared off this one end, made it all square to the bottom, and we now need to cut a series of grooves into this piece of ABS. For all of the grooves that we are going to cut, I have the height of the blade set to 5/8 of an inch, and that will be the depth of our groove. I have also set my fence here and my miter stop block so that I can cut one pass with the table saw, and I want to make it so that that pass is 3/4 of an inch in from one end. Now that one groove that we have cut in here, that one saw curve, is going to be mimicking the one groove in our original store-bought GoPro mount. And what we want to do is we want to make another pass, but when we make that pass, we will leave a rib in the middle that will be 1/8 of an inch thick. Well, before we go any further, we can test the fit now that we have these two grooves made, and we can see that our GoPro fits nicely in between here. There is a little bit of friction, but not enough to hold the camera, but that will come with the hardware that we're going to add afterwards. So for now, there are our two main grooves finished. Our next step is to make another pass on either side of this. We're going to leave 1/8 of an inch of material, just like we did here, 1/8 of an inch material. We're going to cut a second groove, and then we're going to continue following across until we eliminate all of the excess material across here and the excess material across here up to a 3/4 inch mark, leaving that 1/8 inch thick rib here and here. Our next step in the process is to cut the piece to length, and we are done with our 5/8 height, so we can raise the bit or the blade just a little. We're going to line it up, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off to mimic the other side. And because we put our first cut at 3/4 of an inch in, it actually left a 5/8 of an inch ledge on this one outer edge. So we are going to mimic that and cut our mount off of our block. And there we have a rather beefy GoPro mount. It's quite a bit overkill, and it's not finished by any means, but there you have a block of potentially several different GoPro mounts. So we now need to decide how much of this blank we actually require for our mount. And for that, well, we need to decide how we want to mount it. Well, in looking at this mount, I've decided that I would like to have it mount on the end of our gooseneck, just like that. And I mean, how do you mount that? Well, for my idea, I think what I'm going to do is in the end here, I'm going to drill a hole that's big enough to be able to thread or to place this threaded section of our gooseneck into. Well, with that hole drilled, we now need to cut away some of our bottom section so that we can get our lock nut in there. Now, there's several ways that we can go about it. For me, all I'm going to do is run this through the table saw and cut a kerf all the way across in order to open this up, just enough to get the nut in there. Now I know it looks a little strange, but you can see that recess here that we have for the mounting hardware of the gooseneck. And if you don't have a gooseneck, you don't have to do this part of the build. You could always just cut it off at your base and we'll finish it off from there. But what we need at this point in time is the hole that will go right through all three of our ribs that will allow our stock GoPro mount to go through. And for that, we'll just take a measurement of the outer measurement of this. It's a 3/16 inch bolt. That's the diameter of it. So at 1/4 of an inch in from the end and about 1/4 of an inch down from the top, we're going to place a 3/16 of an inch diameter hole. Well, it's now time to cut the mount to length. And this is what I mean by the length. For that, it's 1/2 an inch. So we're going to measure a 1/2 an inch on our blank. We're going to set our stop so that it cuts that 1/2 inch on the outside of the blade. And we're going to lop this end piece of our GoPro mount off. And basically, there is our mount. I am going to take this over to the belt sander and we're going to take off these corners here. If you don't take off those corners, your camera will not be able to pivot. You can see there that it's going to stop and block. So we need to get in there and sand these corners off. Well, I've rounded off the edges here of our homemade GoPro mount, and we just want to test it now on the camera and ensure that we have a full range of motion there when it comes to being able to pivot our camera. That 3/16 of an inch diameter hole that we've drilled here in the ABS is a little tight, but I'm not too concerned about it. But you can see that we have a complete range of motion here, which is what we would have with a store-bought GoPro mount. And now all we need is a nut to be able to place on the end of this mount to screw this in tight and give us the ability to lock it down into whatever position we want. And once you get your GoPro locked on there, you can just place your gooseneck through and thread your nut on. I will most likely be putting some Loctite on this and really cranking it down to give a good solid connection, but you get the idea. Well, we're making fantastic headway with the project, But now you've got this gooseneck with a GoPro mounted on the end, and how are you going to connect it to anything? Well, for that, in comes that spring clamp that I had no use for. So let's head over to the bench and I'll show you how we're going to mount this. Well, the gooseneck of this mounting actually comes with this little L bracket that's on it, and it is as simple as transferring our marks. All I'm going to do is remove this rubber handle. We're going to transfer our marks of our 2 mounting holes here onto our handle of our spring clamp, and I'm going to drill some through holes, and then I'm just going to bolt it onto our spring clamp. And now we're just going to take a 1/4 by 1/2 inch bolt, and we're going to put it right through our mounting holes here, and then mount it in place onto our spring clamp. And there you have it. An ABS GoPro mount. Guys, if you think this is a hokey project, or it's kind of goofy or ridiculous or doesn't make any sense, let me put it to you this way and see how you think about it then. If you price a GoPro mount in your retail store, I don't know what it is in your region, but for a gooseneck mount that is about half the length of this, for the actual brand name accessory, it's about 70 bucks Canadian. That's a lot of coin to put out when all I used here was a very small amount of ABS to get a great quality mount, as well as stuff that was slated for the garbage anyway, with an old gooseneck from an old work light that they were going to throw out, and this clamp that I don't even use anyway. So as far as mounting it goes, now I have a gooseneck that I can arrange and mount it however I want my GoPro to be while I'm filming the show. I can have it there in place. Now, the other point here as well is that the store-bought brand name ones are plastic. This clamp, steel. This gooseneck, all metal, every bit of it. The only thing that's not metal is the ABS plastic mount, and it is just spectacular. Let me give you a close-up of how this looks here, and you can see that we have done a great job in duplicating that GoPro mount and making it so that we have, for pennies, we've made a duplicate of the store-bought version and saved ourselves not only 70 bucks, which would go a long way to, oh, I don't know, buying more material, buying some more ABS, buying some other accessories like memory cards, or, you know, what the heck? Why not save it, put that 70 bucks towards a new tool? How's that? See? This is not a hokey project, guys. This is a money-saving project that, you know what, you can have a lot of fun with. And as far as I'm concerned, for my purposes, this is a very useful mount. Now, let's just talk about the ABS portion of this, which is the actual mount that I showed you that close-up of. That mount, where we first cut those slots, the ones that were 5/8 of an inch deep, you know, our blade was up 5/8 of an inch from the table. Follow that procedure through, and then if you don't want to mount it to the gooseneck, don't. Skip that whole procedure. That blank that we made, you can be lopping pieces off of that and make your own custom mounts for whatever you want. Drill a hole in the bottom and epoxy in a 1/4 nut, and you've instantly got yourself a tripod mount. Eh? Spectacular. Guys, you're only limited by your imagination on how it is that you want to have a mount. Would I trust this gooseneck and this clamp with one of my good GoPros out on a trail attached to my Jeep? Absolutely not. That is not what this is for. This is for here in the shop, and I trust it 100%. However, as far as the other GoPro mounts goes, I've made them before and they all work great. I still use them to this day. Guys, you've got to give this a try. If you are a GoPro user, then you know the expense of these mounts, and I just showed you in a very short amount of time how you can save yourself a ton of cash and make your own. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something from it and that you're going to try it yourself. And I also hope that you're going to join me again for yet another Alternative Tuesdays.